And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 21st. Taking a look at the tropics today, we have what is now Hurricane Epsilon, at least on our numbers. We expect that the National Hurricane Center will change their numbers pretty soon as well, certainly near hurricane strength if nothing else. Saudel also in the western Pacific, leaving the Philippine Islands, a mid-range tropical storm there, and the much smaller depression 20W also there in the western Pacific. On day 153 of the Atlantic hurricane season, we have Epsilon, of course, as mentioned, could become a significant hurricane as it passes Bermuda and then sweep off towards the northeast. Chances of impacts in Bermuda are decreasing. Day 170 of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season, nothing going on here. Just to mention, back in the Atlantic there, another area of interest which could develop later on. Still watching the Caribbean Sea for next week. And in the Western Pacific then, this is where most of the activity is right now, Saudel and 20W, and two other areas of interest, a 50% chance that will follow Saudel pretty much, and a 10% chance that will sort of follow 20W actually, and move through Guam and the southern Mariana Islands. But Saudel itself will probably become a Category 1 or 2 typhoon as it approaches Hainan and the Vietnamese coast. In the North Indian Ocean, there could be a development in the Bay of Bengal, a 40% chance there, probably a weak tropical cyclone if it forms, and the remnants of that tropical storm that we marked a few days ago still going in the western Arabian Sea. So the North Atlantic looking like this right now, an increasingly clear eye in Epsilon, bearing in mind this update came out before the midnight UTC National Hurricane Center advisory, but we think it's a hurricane at this point. Gulf of Mexico fairly quiet. You can see some thunderstorms blowing up there along the coast of Cuba and southern Florida. The Eastern Pacific, there is a weak tropical low there on the eastern side of your screen, and models have been following that a little bit. It's probably the best it's going to look, but who knows, we may get a surprise. But given that this is the Eastern Pacific and what a lackluster year it's been there, I doubt it. Central Pacific also looking quiet. Maybe we won't get a storm there at all this season. The Western Pacific then, Saudel's influence is rather large. A big blow-up of convection extending to its south, and clouds associated with the storm extending to the other area of interest, the depression 20W, which is just off the Ogasawara island chain. But Saudel will continue westwards and could intensify rapidly, is what some models are suggesting, in the near term, 24 to 48 hours. The South Pacific looking fairly quiet, as you would expect at this time of year. Sometimes you can get an early season cyclone here, but not this time around by the looks of things, not yet. The Indian Ocean then as well, you can already see that disturbance in the Bay of Bengal, which will slowly get its act together, we expect. And you can see just a tiny little bit of convection there on the western side from that, what we called a tropical storm. Looking at sea surface temperatures, the Eastern Pacific very warm indeed, 30 degrees still along the coast of Mexico. Can't rule out that late season big storm that could still happen there. The Atlantic Ocean, Western Caribbean still the place to be, but looking out towards the open Atlantic, of course, where Epsilon is right now, still 28 degrees quite easily. As it gets to Bermuda, 26 to 27 degrees, and then as it shoots off northeast, those temperatures will degrade very quickly. The Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal is the hot spot, 30 degrees along the coast of northeastern India and Bangladesh, where that system could track in a few days. And in the Western Pacific, it's the coastal areas off the Philippines, really out into the Philippine Sea that are the warmest, 30 degrees plus. South China Sea a little bit cooler after recent storms passed through that area. So Saudel really only has the 48-hour period to make the most of those conditions that are very good, but still fairly good as it continues on towards the Vietnamese coast. Sea surface temperature anomalies right now, the Western Pacific above average almost across the board. The Eastern Pacific, the subtropical zones very warm, but the equatorial zones still below average for the La Nina. In the Atlantic there as well, you can see there very warm waters, generally where Epsilon is, the little cool pockets nearby. On October 21st, 2005, Hurricane Wilma was making landfall after becoming the most intense hurricane in the Atlantic basin on record before and since. Was making a Category 4 landfall on the Yucatan Peninsula, a massive storm that certainly left an impact there and then went on to the coast of Florida. Elsewhere in the eastern Pacific on this day, there was a very tiny depression that was dying off. So boring, I guess, that we haven't listed it here, but there you are. So the next name in an outstandingly crazy Atlantic hurricane season is Zeta, which would tie the naming list, at least, for the 2005 season, the record holder. In the Eastern Pacific, the next name is Odalis, and in the Central Pacific, the next name on list 1 is still Hone. In the Western Pacific, we're now looking out for Malawi, followed by Goni. The North Indian Ocean, we're still waiting for Gati. We thought we might have had that from that previous system, but never got to that status officially. And in the Southern Hemisphere, we are next up in the Australian region. It will be Imogen. The Southwest Indian Ocean starts off with Alicia, and in the South Pacific, the next name is Yasa. That's all for now. We'll have another tropical weather bulletin tomorrow night.